Welcome back to another episode of Real Film Chronicles podcast. We're excited to have everybody here today in this nice companion piece to our top 10 of 2021 episode. This is the highly requested bottom 5 of 2021, where Nathan and I will share our bottom 5 worst movies that we experienced from 2021. It's a fairly short episode. We had a lot of fun recording it, lots of laughs, lots of interesting hot takes. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and again, thank you for listening.
So now, not to disparage filmmakers or filmmaking, but I think it's interesting, I think, for us to see where our tastes lie as well. But I think we wanted to talk about just kind of our bottom 5 films from 2021.
Yeah, bottom 5s. And I didn't go into this list with as much criteria or thought as the top 10. Like, there are movies in here I've rated 2 stars, which isn't by any means like a horrible film, but maybe disappointing movies, just movies that I know I'll never revisit. I'm kind of striking off the list. But I can get started with my number 5.
Oh, yeah. I didn't do them in any real order, so I don't know.
Yeah, they're kind of just all over the place. But my number 5 here is Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
Really? Oh,
I thought this was a really awful film, and this is a movie I gave 2 stars.
Not awful. Come on. Boo. Boo earns.
This might be a controversial entry. I mean, obviously, with you must have enjoyed this movie much more. I didn't get anything out of this film, honestly. Like, it's well, listen. And I've seen the positive reviews, and it's one of these things where the movie was enjoyable to watch. Sort of enjoyable to watch. It was definitely not one of those, oh, if you turn off your brain, you'll enjoy it more. I don't want to do that. This movie just kind of didn't meet any of my expectations. I like Woody Harrelson as an actor. I thought he was awful in this film. I thought the Cletus Cassidy, or whatever his name is, was awful. I thought his interactions with Eddie Brock was awful.
Can you hear my head shaking on this? I don't know.
I can see it. But yeah, Nathan's head is shaking back and forth at everything I'm saying here.
Maybe it's because I was watching it with my son is super pumped about superhero movies and about Venom, and I was watching it maybe with him, and his excitement rubbed off on me. But like, I'm not going to argue that Venom, Let There Be Carnage was a great movie. Was it a bit of mindless fun? Absolutely. But like, yeah, I'm giving you a bit of a hard time, but I can absolutely see it's not in comparison to your list, obviously, it's not exactly Shakespeare. Yeah, let's be honest.
Go ahead. Let's hear your number 5.
Number 5 for me is Jungle Cruise. This kind of watered down Pirates of the Caribbean wannabe. I think we specifically put out a special episode just to talk about how bad this movie was.
Honestly, I totally forgot about this movie when assembling this list. I must have given it like 2.5 stars or something. But
I think you liked it a bit more than me. But Jungle Cruise was just like, it just felt like corporate filmmaking at its worst. Just like it felt like they were kind of checking boxes and trying to capitalize on successful franchises from the past without actually looking at what made them successful to begin with. But yeah, Jungle Cruise was a huge disappointment. What's your number 4, Brian?
My number 4 is Don't Breathe 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've actually actively avoided watching this movie.
You haven't seen this one, right?
I don't plan to either. You can spoil it.
Yeah, I don't think I need to spoil it here, but this is the thing. It's like the first movie was pretty solid. I've gone back to it a couple times. It was interesting. It was like this horror, more of a thriller that had some pretty unique things in it. Like every character was a villain, right? Like there were a bunch of house thieves. Like they're breaking into this dude's house. He's blind and he's protecting his home. It's like, oh, this is incredible. But he's up to some really awful things in the basement that make him an absolutely vile character, right?
Yeah.
And then they go in, make a sequel, which is actually a prequel with him as the lead again. And it's just like, no, I don't want to sympathize with this villain. He's really messed up. They put in like his daughter in the film that I think you're supposed to, she's good, like, right? But it's unfair. I mean, she's a child. You can't use children in this way to just like evoke that fake sympathy for her uncle who's going through all this stuff. Yeah. There are bad people, and the movie had nothing interesting to say. It was awful. I felt gross after watching it. I don't think it failed completely because, he's a vile character. I just didn't think the movie really worked. It wasn't necessary. And I think I try and look at most movies with something positive. Like sometimes a movie has something to say, like the creators have something to say, and it might get lost throughout the creation of the film. There's hundreds of people involved in creating a movie. This one, in my mind, 100% does not need to exist, had nothing to say, was not interesting, was just absolutely awful.
Yeah. And I'm actively avoiding the film based on the character in the first movie and looking at the ads and what people have said online about essentially turning that terrible character into the protagonist and the hero of the story. No interest at all.
Yeah. Hit me with your number 4.
Number 4, I don't know if this is controversial, but Ghostbusters Afterlife. I thought
there's no business putting that movie that far down.
Yes, it was an absolute, I won't say dumpster fire, because I will give it one thing. It was a very poignant, emotional send-off for Harold Ramis, who passed several years ago. That was the one thing that the movie got right. Everything else was just this weird fetishization of the Ghostbusters mythology. It was these long, loving shots of the proton packs and this idea of only people who are born from previous Ghostbusters can be Ghostbusters kind of thing, or lead the Ghostbusters.
I didn't get that out of it.
It was this weird kind of this perversion of the sense of legacy, and then it's the same beats. It's oh, we got Gozer again. Oh, we got Vince Clortho and Zool again.
I do agree that going back to the first movie and the same kind of Uber Ghost there was a bit weak, but
listen, I know people don't love the second movie as much, but to just essentially ignore it almost completely and have almost no nods to the second movie, and you're saying oh, this is you're a fan of these movies, but to have just I don't know whether it's the Stranger Things effect where it's just oh, we have a group of these plucky teens are coming to save the day. Is no. You're completely missing the point of the original film. This one had nothing new to say, nothing interesting to say. And it was just this weird kind of snake eating its tail. It was oh, remember proton packs? Oh, look at this. It was almost like Ghostbusters porn, where it was oh yeah, look at how the way that the proton packs were shot is oh, look at this, baby. You want some of this, don't you?
I'm there for it. Those close-ups and how weathered and detailed those proton packs looked. I was there for it. That moment. That was Ecto 1.
No. Oh, it was completely missing the point. It was mythologizing the past and holding it up as this sacred object to be worshipped. And it's no, that's not what any of these movies were ever about, and it makes me angry thinking about it.
Here's the thing, and I think you might put weaponized nostalgia in my mind for a thing. And yes, this movie
weaponized nostalgia.
I was showing up for this movie, and here's the thing: this is going to make you sick. When that Ecto 1 blasted out of the barn, and it later on, it tears around a corner and the sirens are going and it's literally the exact same sound from the first movie, I got chills. I was just yes, I'd love this. But I understand it is that nostalgia.
I hated how it was trying to manipulate me emotionally. It was just it was so blatant. There was just you're supposed to feel this at this point because you watched this movie and look at the same thing. It's no, to heck with you, Ghostbusters Afterlife. You can go sit on it. Get out of here. I'm really angry just thinking about it. Anyway, what's your number 3?
My number 3, and I'll just preface this to say, I like watching some of these DC animated movies, and some of them are not great, and some of them are really good. Injustice was a really poor DC animated movie. And I'll preface that one again by saying I'm not really familiar with the source material. I don't follow the comics. I know Injustice was a video game, a one-on-one fighter where the heroes are kind of ruthless and R-rated and all that stuff. And this one is no different. It's a bunch of, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. They're all jerks. They're all doing crazy things to one another. The movie is 70 minutes long. It is pure action, front to back. And there is a complete lack of characterization. There's no real good story. There's nothing compelling here. It just felt so surface level, and maybe it's unfair. Like maybe this is a kid's movie, and I'm a 40-year-old man who just doesn't understand. Like I'm not getting anything out of this movie. But you know what? A lot of those old DC animated movies worked for multiple audiences. It worked on multiple levels. This one was just bad. And I actually, this one compelled me to write a review on Letterboxd very quickly after watching it, which you have to go check out and hit that like button. But the one thing that took me out of the movie the entire time, I felt like I was watching unfinished animation. I thought the character models looked awful. And there were these thick black lines. I'm holding my hand up to the camera. You can't see it. But they're like right under their knuckles was like a thick black line. I'm just like, were those black lines like placeholders for other animators to like draw the hands? It drove me bananas. And I Googled this thing afterwards and nobody was talking about it. So I felt like I was going crazy watching this movie. Do not recommend.
Okay.
What is your number 3?
Well, can I do 3 and 2 together? They kind of go together.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, 3 and 2 were Shang-Chi and Black Widow. Just like
that is a hot take.
Yeah, and I know people out there are gonna say it's like, oh yeah, like they weren't that bad. But it's like after the heights that we reached with Avengers Endgame and really even all those Phase 3 movies where you had like Infinity War and Ragnarok and all these great entries into the movies, into the MCU that is, and then to come out with like these really weak, terrible, pandering movies like Shang-Chi and Black Widow that were just like, yeah, we're finally getting more diverse leads here, but like, why put them in these terrible movies with these terrible third act CGI mess in gray? I don't know, just like things flying everywhere. It's so dark you can't see anything. I mean, even like Shang-Chi was so disappointing, where they could have like really taken the inspiration from those martial arts films of the past.
Yeah.
And you can see hints of that, like I think they referenced specifically Jackie Chan influencing the bus fight scene at the beginning, and that was one of the better sequences in the movie. So not so much that they were like absolute terrible movies, it's just so disappointing, and it's just so insulting that Marvel or Disney really, because they're owning it, that they feel that they can just put out this mediocre garbage and have dribble. And just like expect us to like salivate over it like some kind of Pavlovian response. And the sad thing is these movies, because the wheels are in motion, because they're part of the overarching story, they're making tons of money off of this. But it's like, why do we have to settle for this mediocrity, and we're being like breeding this mediocrity into our culture, into the movies. And it's just like all the resources that Disney's taking away from, like the Night House, for instance, it's owned ultimately by Disney, right? Because I think it's by 20th Century Studios or something.
Yep.
It got no play. It got very little distribution because they were so focused on pushing out this junk like Black Widow and Shang-Chi that, people like we mentioned the Night House, and we know it because we're kind of in that world. We're looking out for these films. Most people I know have never even heard of the Night House, and it's like for us it's one of the best films of 2021. But like everyone's heard of Black Widow and Shang-Chi. It's just like eating up all his bandwidth from all these other films, and that to me is the larger crime I think at play. But they go together to me. Shang-Chi and Black Widow are kind of interchangeable at 3 and 2 for me.
And I can't disagree that those were poor movies. But I only have really one question, and this is probably why it's the hottest take, is that this means Eternals is ranked higher for you than these two movies, right?
Yes, 'cause even though Eternals was not great for me, but I appreciated that they did something a little bit different visually in terms of storytelling. There was too much packed in. Obviously, they were trying to make an Avengers before, like to kind of jump to the end. There's too many characters to balance out effectively. But I really appreciated, at least they were trying to do something different with the characters and with the narrative, and even visually. Didn't always work, but to me, much rather see the Eternals try and fail than Black Widow and Shang-Chi just completely phone it in and not even try.
So that was your number 2 and 3, a 1-2 punch of MCU disaster.
Yes.
And I think we could talk forever about the MCU and like the Phase 4 and all this stuff, but we got to push forward. My number 2 of the worst movies I've seen in 2021 is Alien Conquest. Okay.
What?
This is going to be a pretty obscure movie. This, I think, was the most obscure movie that I watched in 2021. It is a straight to streaming, I mean, straight to video.
Yeah.
This is from one of those studios that just makes really cheap knockoff films of popular blockbuster movies.
Yeah. Like, are you talking about like an Asylum film?
Exactly. I don't know if this is Asylum, but this one, normally I wouldn't even, well, the thing is with this one, it might have been in this territory of it's so bad, it's good. I actively enjoyed watching this. But I think this one stands apart from those other ones that are so poor that I don't even want to think about them. I just got a kick out of a whole bunch of different things. It's like, the budget is super low. And like every outdoor scene is in generic woods. And in my mind, they have a van with the actors and some cameras. They get out in the middle of the woods. They start filming at noon because of the lighting. Everything is lit the same. Everything looks the same. There's no filming permits to worry about. Get out, film. You have 15 minutes. Get out of there, right? It's just, it was crazy. The special effects are getting better in these really poor movies.
Yeah.
I think there's more talent out there. And I mean, they are what they are. But if you watch the trailer for this movie, you've seen basically 90% of the budget of the movie. What stands apart for this one is that it's an adaptation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. And I think with a classic story like that, like this is public domain, this doesn't feel like a knockoff of a modern blockbuster. This is an adaptation of a 100-year-old story that we all know. I mean, you have the alien tripod machines, you have these funky looking aliens inside. It's the same story. You kind of know what's going to happen, but you've pretty much seen everything in this movie in the trailer. It's a really short film. I think it's in like the 70-minute territory. It's full of bad acting. It's full of bad effects, but I mean, it had heart. And here I am talking about bad movies, and I'm saying you should probably watch Alien Conquest because it had a lot of heart. This is one of those things. I rate this movie like 1.5 stars, but I had fun watching it. It's not like watching Injustice, my previous entry, and being upset while watching it. It's like this one, it's so bad I feel bad for everyone involved, but I hope that they will be able to do better. One of the big things that really stood out to me was the acting levels. Like we have one character who's probably a better actor. He's working on a different energy level than his co-stars. So he's sharing a scene. Obviously, these people are just kind of showing up. I don't know what they've done. I don't want to like berate their acting ability, but they're bad in this movie. And he's working at a different energy level than his surrounding castmates. And it's just really off-putting when you're watching. It's stuff like that really make this a poor movie. Now, you did 2 and 3. Should I just jump into number 1 for me?
Do your number 1. What was your absolute worst movie that you saw in 2021?
Just like my number 1 top 10 film was a horror movie, The Deep House is my worst horror movie that I saw in 2021.
Okay, I've been wondering about that one. I saw that I saw it on different lists and stuff, but I haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet. I was curious, but you're saying that it's complete garbage.
For me, it was complete. It was complete garbage. Like, here's the thing. Like, I just talked about Alien Conquest. Like, really poor budget. This movie looks like a well-produced movie. The acting in it is fine. The directing, everything in this movie is fine. It just did absolutely nothing for me. It's a film about a couple who are like YouTubers who film their diving journeys. They find interesting things, and it's like in this case, they have got a tip on an abandoned home that's like 100 feet underwater. This is an interesting concept, and so 90% of the movie is underwater. The actors are in their heavy scuba gear behind masks the entire time, and everything is predictable. Like, you know what the movie's about before I even talk about just that concept. And without telling you any more of the plot, you know what happens in the movie, and you know how the ending works out. And it wasn't like so bad I found the movie offensive or anything. It was just so bad I forgot about it moments after I watched it. I mean, I had to go back and rewatch the trailer for this, all the stuff, and I log everything. It had this low rating, and it's just like I forgot that I watched this fairly recently, and it was just bad. But it has an average rating on Letterboxd of 2.5. This is probably one of the higher rating ones that I've listed, but it did nothing for me. I don't think it added to the genre. It had nothing interesting to say.
Man.
So all that being said, what's sitting at your number 1 worst movie of 2021?
This was unintentional. It's kind of poetic, but Nick Cage starred in both my favorite and least favorite movie of 2021, which is kind of on brand for Nicolas Cage, I guess.
I almost blew out the water I was drinking.
Least favorite movie had to be Prisoners of the Ghostland.
Oh, jeez.
Maybe it was because I had my expectations set a little bit higher. I was hoping for like one of these kind of surprise, kind of, hidden gems maybe. Because with Nicolas Cage, you never know, because he does star in such a large array of movies of varying quality. And Cage himself, I always love watching what he does and seeing what he brings to the role. With Prisoners of the Ghostland, it was some weird, I think, post-apocalyptic setting or like an alternate reality. It's never clear.
Who knew? It was not clear.
Like nothing about the movie was clear. The script that they had to work with was trash.
Messy.
Sophia Botella was in there as well, and she's really good at action scenes, and she's on my radar of
she's good in other movies.
To look out for. Yeah, and like you put Sophia Botella in there, and it's like she finally got an action scene at the end, but it's like you're wasting her best talents here. But like the plot was convoluted. It was just like a bizarre mix of kind of Western and Eastern iconography. Without, you look at something like Blade Runner, which like you takes like kind of the Asian influence and the Western influence and kind of blends that together in this kind of, really well into this vision of the future. And Prisoners of the Ghostland was opposite of that. It was this really weird mishmash of different people, and it had a Western setting with a samurai setting, which should go together because thematically they're kind of the same, but like it feels completely out of place. Nicolas Cage is getting his genitals blown off and his hand cut off. That was
so weird.
Really, really weird, where like Nicolas Cage is holding up one of his testicles that was blown off.
It was so brutal.
Yeah, it was just like
but made no sense.
Nothing about the movie made sense. A lot of the performances fell flat, probably because of the script was just complete and utter nonsense. I wouldn't be surprised if this was one of those things where like they just had a computer randomly generate a script as a joke or as an experiment and then just filmed it on a dare or something. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. I watched this as well, and I feel like we were prepping to maybe feature this in one of our episodes last year, but we just neither one of us really got around to watching it. And then we do for this 2021 project, and it's like, thank God we didn't have to sit through that and like be forced to talk about it for an hour. So it was really bad. But I was interested, like, who was behind this film, and I looked up afterwards. It's a fairly prolific Japanese filmmaker who created this movie, and I think the story is that he wanted to work with Nicolas Cage. Like he had seen...
Who doesn't?
And I can't remember which Cage film it was. I didn't really recognize it, but he had seen that movie, and he's just like, I need that Nick Cage in this movie of mine. And looking at his credits, like he's directed a whole bunch of things. He has 60 plus entries in Letterboxd, but I don't know what else happened to make this movie so bad. And does that speak to the rest of this guy's movies? I don't know. It was, I agree with you. Prisoners of the Ghostland was pretty poor.
Yeah, it was easily, it was like, but that's Nick Cage for you though. That's the mystery of Nick Cage. Like he's in like the best and worst movies. He's everywhere and nowhere.
Yeah, right. And that's like it's funny too because it's perfect to put it at the top. He's at the top of both lists. It perfectly encapsulates his career. And then probably right in the very direct middle, you have Willy's Wonderland from last year.
I was gonna say, like he's everywhere on the spectrum all at once.
Yeah. This still might become a Nick Cage podcast series.
It's inevitable.
There's some interesting takes in the bottom five.
We might have to do an episode about Ghostbusters Afterlife, it sounds like.
Well, our listeners are always remind me that we never disagree on a movie. The problem is with Ghostbusters Afterlife, like I understand that I'm being manipulated. I don't really care. I was basically, I was just sitting there eating my popcorn. It's just like, I'm just going to live this up for now. And it's kind of like one of those things where I think the circumstance, just like you were watching, what was that movie with your son there?
Yeah, Let There Be
Venom.
Carnage. Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
Just like you were watching Venom, Let There Be Carnage with your son. It's about circumstances and how you're watching this movie.
Yep.
I'm watching Ghostbusters Saturday night, popcorn, soda in hand, and I'm down for it. It just scratched that itch that I had at the time.
That's fair.
Will I go out and rewatch it later on? Possibly, but I'm much more interested in going back to Ghostbusters 1 and 2.
For the record, I believe I rated this lower than the 2016 remake.
Ooh.
Yeah, take that. Think about that for a while, Brian.
Any other closing comments? Any honorable mentions for really poor movies?
A couple. There was one I watched the other day, Naked Singularity, which had such potential, but it just kind of fell flat. I appreciated it was what it was trying to do, but just wasn't able to do it. Overall, I think for the most part, I watched more good than bad from 2021.
Yeah.
I don't know, that just happened to be my viewing habits. But overall, it seemed like a pretty decent year in film.
I was kind of surprised Mortal Kombat didn't make your list. The top 5 or bottom 5, sorry.
No, I thought it was a middle of the road movie for me. Yeah. What do you got? What do you got?
I think I'll
Brian?
just throw in one honorable mention was The Woman in the Window, starring my girl Amy Adams.
That's too bad for Amy.
Was really unfortunate. I think this was a Netflix film maybe, and I put it on immediately because I'm going to show up for any movie this woman puts out.
Absolutely.
And I just could barely sit through this film. It was really poor, but it's like the production on it is fine. Everything is fine. The acting is fine. It just wasn't interesting. And it was ultimately just really disappointing. Right. It could have easily made that list. Another movie that we watched together over the summer was The Conjuring 3. Was rated very low on my list, but I didn't feel comfortable putting it in here because, again, I just forgot about the movie moments after we watched it until we bring it up every so often.
It wasn't great. I think it was easily the weakest of that core Conjuring trilogy.
Yes.
I haven't seen all the other ancillary films in that series, like the Annabelle and the Nun and was it La Roca, or whatever the heck it's called.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't, I think Conjuring 3 was just one of those ones where it was meh. It was mediocre. It was middle of the road. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It was certainly a movie that exists.
It exists, and it'll just be forever remembered as that.
Yeah.
This year was a bonkers year for movies. There's all sorts of, I think you're right. There's a lot of quality. I haven't pulled together my stats of like the overall like average rating, but even in my bottom 5, some movies are rated 2 stars. I have a lot of movies at 2.5, and I enjoyed them just fine. A lot of highly rated films.
And Benedict Cumberbatch was in most of them.
Yeah, he showed up everywhere. That's a wrap on another episode of the Real Film Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us for the next episode. We can be found around the internet and social media, with our home base being realfilmchronicles.com, which will have all the links you need to follow and keep in touch with us. If you have a moment, we'd really appreciate if you could leave some feedback, such as a rating on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you're listening on. And feel free to send us an email to realfilmchronicles@outlook.com. We love some suggestions, questions, or general comments and would enjoy including them on an upcoming episode. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and keep your film journey going.